Uh, you you mentioned lineage. Lineage is actually an uh, let us say a deep issue. So let's not discuss the depth of lineage and what that means, and start with a lightweight word.
Okay.
And the lightweight word that Dan was considering was the word angle. That
Oh.
joining the organization of Western Dhamma teachers then will give um, the individual teachers an angle, or let us say a method of verification. And so that's the whole start of what we're looking at. Now, there's another word that we can use, and that the next word is the one that is already in service, and that is certification.
Hmm.
But certification has a certain kind of monetary quality to it.
Yeah.
And so I would rather avoid that particular word, but it will do if nothing else can come up with. Um, Now, this issue or the idea of certification is the angle that we would find with some people that I have seen on the internet use that, oh, I've got a PhD in Buddhist studies from Harvard. If that's this guy's angle,
Yeah.
right? He's kind of certified. And yet, I can understand that, in fact, he has, even though he's got, in Western terminology, very high class certification, he's actually got no lineage at all.
Yeah.
And here's the reason why is because he might have been under the tutelage of one or two or even a committee of professors
Yeah.
at Harvard, but none of them had any real Buddhist lineage. They all were doing it by reading books.
Yeah.
And so it's possible for a student of the Dhamma to not really ever be around real teachers. Uh, or maybe not use the word real, but use the word teacher who has been in a lineage and understands a few things. There's just
Yeah.
so much that you cannot learn from a book.
Yeah.
Universities have known that all along, in the sense of they have what's called didactic and experiential in psychotherapy systems, or in universities they call it class and lab. If you
Yeah.
take a class in chemistry, it's normally going to, or in the old days, it was a 4 hour class. Why? Because you had 3 hours of classroom, but then you had an hour or 2 hours a week where you were in the lab doing your best to blow the world up, or at least doing the experiments that the teachers expected you to do, so that you actually got some hands on. So the problem with the guy who's got a PhD in Buddhism is he's had no hands on, no feet on, no robe on, nothing
Yeah.
except reading a lot of books. Um, I imagine that what is part of the teacher training program to train teachers in meditation would be a combination of some meditation techniques and also some psychology. But the problem is that if the students who are in the meditation uh, training certification program have to pay money for that, then they're automatically now in the mindset that it's okay for me now to go out and teach meditation for profit.
Hmm.
And so, uh, finding a way of interrupting that mentality would be a good thing, so that the entire student body and alumni of every meditation teacher's training certification program that's done in English language, all of these students would be invited and alumni invited to join this organization that we're talking about. Why? Because if they're in the organization, then they're leaning towards um, the original intention of the Sangha, that this is to promote the teachings of the Buddha the way that the Buddha would approve of. And the Buddha would not approve of charging money for it, even though there's a lot of people who would say, well, meditation teachers have got to eat.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're trying to get together, is to get the teachers to a point where they can cooperate, communicate, have a donor base,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can kind of split the model between the Asian model
Yeah.
and the Western model. Because the Asian model that actually does have lineage requires that not only do you go and study with a teacher, you live with him.
Right. Which is
Maybe not in the same building, but certainly on the premises, on the ground, so that you're around, and not only is the teacher visible to the students, but everyone at the Watt is basically visible to everybody else at the Watt.
yeah.
Okay.
So I think that the altruistic side of this is really really important, because this project for me has uh, like civilization wide import. Like, so when I started my recovery this time, what I noticed is that as I did my emotional work, for the first time, I could eat a reasonable meal, um, uh, because I was dealing with my emotions and I didn't need to overeat, and um, yada yada. And I immediately thought, oh, if I can consume less from doing emotional work, that seems to be something that's relevant to society. And to get people out of seeking the wrong love in all the wrong places, like you say, like the wrong kind of satisfaction, and get the right idea of satisfaction, um, is paramount right now. And to get out of to get out of a culture of every person for themselves and into a culture of cooperation and altruism, and build that sense of common endeavor. And the beautiful thing is that the moment is ripe beyond ripe right now. Meditation is so popular, but it's being used to numb instead of get insight. And there's this great interest, this great thirst for spiritual meaning, that there was a kind of a reaction to against the sentimental stuff of the 60s and 70s. We kind of lost that for a bit, but it's come back. There's this great thirst for it.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Okay.
It's the feeling that I have deep inside is that we're all sitting on the side of a mountain that's rumbling.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, there's
High five.
it's about, something's about to blow, literally.
I feel almost faint. Give me a second. Yes. No, this is the moment. Corona, everybody realizing that we're in this thing together, everybody realizing that big changes are possible if there's the will. All this talk about what can change, now that we realize that, this is, the iron is hot. The iron is hot.
I know. I can feel. And not only that, but I've been here not from the very beginning, but for many, many years of seeing things. And right now it feels like that something new is brewing.
Yes.
Also, what I have seen is many of the things that I saw um, wrong headed in Reddit, that people
Yeah.
were making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And now what I have not very recently, but several times I have seen that those mistakes have been corrected, and that it's almost done in the language of the way that I speak. So I know that my students have beginning to
Yeah.
um, modify or change the whole way of looking at the Dhamma, because Achan Po, as you know, has sent me to do this stuff on Skype,
Yeah.
uh, to do the super mundane Dhamma, to do just the really good stuff, and to not bring in all of Buddhism. So that's why this organization, you see,
Yeah.
um, it had been percolating in the background, sort of in the sense of um, the original idea was outreach.
Yeah.
But then I recognized, wait a minute, the outreach that needs to be done is much bigger than I am.
Yeah.
It is much bigger than I am. That I can only handle just so many
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
uh, but that I can give. Uh, I've got a lot of stuff that's just come by natural. The point would be that most Westerners do not understand the value of the various Asian Watts
Yeah.
that are throughout the West.
No,
While at the same,
they
pardon?
feel like something that we're not welcome in.
Well, that's a language barrier, basically, because the two main things that I would say about the Asian Watts in the West is the Asians who build these Watts and populate them with the monks know what they're looking for in a monk. So there's already a number of high quality monks from Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and also to a degree Sri Lanka and uh, Burma. So Gunaratana is actually a very good example of that. He got started in the Sri Lankan Vihara in Washington, D.C. But he eventually, because he knew English, he put in an output or an outreach in English, or they were welcoming there of English language speaking people in Washington. That was where I got to know him long before the Bhavanov Society was started in the late 80s. That's when I had known him. It was because of his language. He spoke English, and that was all that was necessary, the extra spark that it took to get a such situation like Bhavana Society going. We can do that times 50 if we can make a connection with the various monks
Yeah.
who can speak some English. And in fact, if more Westerners would go to the Watts and the temples from Asia,
Yeah.
that would help foster the monks there learning to speak English.
I'd love that. That would I before my addiction I wanted to travel the world teaching English. I can't think of anything more uh, fitting.
How far, how close to you are you to Seattle?
It's something like a 5 hour drive. Yeah, into crazy
That's
land.
that's quite a lot. I didn't recognize it as so far. I mean, you look on the map and it's only an inch away.
Yeah, 5 hours. I spend 5 hours picking my nose sometimes. 5 hours, nothing.
There is a Watt in Seattle. that is dedicated, or let us say, part of their uh, lineage. Their lineage is with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Okay.
Now, when I was in Chicago in 2002, I knew then through the Chicago Watt that the Chicago Watt was helping to get a Watt in Seattle started. But then, out of sight, out of mind, it dropped right out of my mind until just recently when Robert pointed out to me, no, there's a huge Bhikkhu Buddhadasa Watt in Seattle. There may back now be other Watts for Bhikkhu Buddhadasa in the United States.
Yeah.
But this one's well established. In one of the photos on the web is a photo of their library, and it shows that their library is well stocked to give books out for free. English books, lots of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa books, and yet the people of Seattle haven't caught on to this Watt yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm wanting to get the guys that I know in Seattle to start attending, paying attention, etc., like that. But right now, because of coronavirus, they're closed. Naturally, this is not the right moment. But in a few months, that would be the right thing for us to do. I do have one student in Chicago. I should point him towards the Watt that's in Chicago that's associated with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Okay.
So it's okay. They're making all that noise. Don't worry about it.
My brain's going pew pew pew. I think that this is part, or rather, my thinking on this issue is along the same lines, but big, because I think a lot about this stuff. I've come to realize that although I'm committed to this path of awakening, that I'm not a Buddhist. You know, Buddhism is something I do. So far, it's ringing true.
I'm not a Buddhist either.
Good.
In many ways, in many technical ways, I am, but in the way the word's used, I'm not.
Yeah, like it's a big part of my life, but at the same time, it's not the flag I'm going charging into the future with.
Well, that's the whole point of it, is to drop all flags.
I really
do not carry a banner.
It changed my life with that, and you continue to change my life, and I'm so grateful for it. Truly, man.
So
deeply. Hold on, I'm going to explode. Yeah, what you said about that got me to the point of like, you're not on a different side. I'm not on any side. I'm not even on my side. I'm on everybody's side. I'm on the interbeing side. And I think with this moment in that we find ourselves of existential threat, I know you have a different feeling than I do on it, but not only every spiritual or school of thinking that's worth its salt has things about dropping materialism, about what's really satisfactory, and they're all out there and they're all big parts of the world. What I envision is this kind of thing. This is a moment we need to come together. We need to start teaching for free. Not keep it esoteric. And I envision a cooperation across religions, saying we have a common endeavor right now to change the culture. We're going to work together, put down our differences and realize, our common goals. And my thinking is entirely on, I realized that, my personal work on my emotions and my worldview is helping me care less about consumerism and be able to interact better. And I've also realized, which is a pretty, facile thing, but just that, I'm part of the system. I contribute to all the stuff that I say that I'm against. And then I thought, for the big changes that we need to make, we need more social solidarity. Right now, we're so divided, and there's the forces that want to control us are trying to divide us. So I want to bring people together, stop seeing each other as others, get into the one tribe mindset. And I have notebooks filled. I want to do a social network. The tentative name for it is enough. Enough of the old way we've been doing things, and enough for yourself. The world is enough. You're enough. Where it's all about getting people to see people as they really are, and fostering altruism, fostering compassion. This kind of thing that you're talking about with the Western Buddhist Sangha is something that I want to do with as many people as possible in as many different ways as possible.
Okay. I agree with that sentiment. The example that I used about the American Medical Association, it has some value and also some places where the analogy breaks down. But at the last turn of the century, there, you could even go so far as to call it the 1890s. There was kind of a mini revolution that was going on scientifically, to where in the United States at that time, the medical profession was full of charlatans and snake oil salesmen, quackery, anything. I mean, anybody could hang out a shingle that says that they were a doctor, and then they would go into business. Some would go to medical school, but it's easier to get a printer to print a diploma from a medical school than it is to actually go to medical school. And in the Old West and whatnot, that was a big issue. So this was why the American Medical Association was formed. Now, less than half the doctors in the United States are part of the American Medical Association. It's gotten very political in many ways that were, let us say, detrimental. But the point that I'm making is that the AMA, community of doctors who knew each other at their level of qualifications, etc., could kind of root out those who were either charlatans or quacks. Now, we probably don't have quite that much of an issue in Western Buddhism now, except that there is a huge number of people who are getting really deep into Buddhism, and yet they don't have much of a background other than reading books and doing their own practice. And yet many of them maybe done 1, 2, 4, 5 retreats. We're talking about just your average Joe who's maybe done some retreats, maybe read some books, and is getting gung-ho into the Dhamma and wants to teach.
Yeah.
they go out and who's to stop them?
Every single thing that you teach me, I pass on immediately. That's just the kind of person that I am.
Okay, all right. Well, um, the problem is that if the guy begins to sell what he is learning, then it belongs to him. I'm selling you this. I'm getting the reward and whatnot back from it. So that's the danger that these guys have.
Yeah.
The next point, which actually the one that you started to make, is that the more someone tells the Dhamma, the better at telling the Dhamma they become. There is more than one sutta. One of the ones in the Majjhima Nikaya just kind of mentioned it in practice, but in passing. But in the Anguttara, there is actually a sutta about the 5 ways to learn the Dhamma.
Okay.
And listening, communicating with friends, personal practice, that kind of stuff. But the crown jewel is teaching the Dhamma. That the very best way to learn the Dhamma is to teach it.
That's a human universal, actually.
That's universal humanly, okay? If you really want to learn some algebra, at least do 1 semester of teaching algebra to a bunch of 9th graders.
Yeah.
So that'll help that kind of foundation. So this is exactly what's happened. And part of it has to do with the sincerity that it starts off with Harry and Opata in the sense that the teachers would normally and naturally feel embarrassed if they told something that they knew in advance was false. Later, that goes to the point that they were embarrassed to tell someone something if it might be false, or which in another way of saying it, that the teacher will tell something and he knows that he does not know where that came from. No reference.
Yeah.
All right. So as we begin to teach, we begin to get a bit more scholarly. We begin to figure out, well, where did I hear that? Or how do I know that?
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I continue to do that is because I'm on a kind of a regular basis still looking at Bhikkhu Buddhadasa stuff. And from time to time, I'll say, aha, I see. That's where I got that.
Uh-huh.
And then there are, on some occasions, one example would be Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's point about wisdom at the point of contact so that we know our feelings. And I wonder where Bhikkhu Buddhadasa got that. And finally, I found it in the Digha Nikaya on the, I forget the name of the sutta. I think it's number 15.
Oh, yes. Sutta number 15 of the Digha
Nikaya. All right. So this is the kind of thing that I'm getting at, that when people begin to teach the Dhamma, they want to teach it correctly because they don't want to be embarrassed that their students may know more than they do, or other people are out there saying, aha, that's wrong.
You know what I love about passing this stuff on is when people surpass me and start teaching me. That's the beautiful thing. You know, like I know that, like, because I'm big on interbeing. As this is going, it's like, oh yeah, we're all one person. You're like, yeah, I can't control where you go, but you're me and I'm you. Not like, you know, literally, but like we're a unit. Anyway.
I like interconnected. Interbeing, I got a bit of a definitional problem of what is a being.
It's evocative. Let's roll with it. That's a rabbit hole, but I guess I know, like, when I'm supporting the people that I'm living with, it comes back to me. And sometimes I've even heard things that I've said come back to me when I've needed it, and then people put it through their different lenses. And you know, like one of one of my hobbies, because I'm in a 12-step fellowship, which while it is apparently a different paradigm, I just feel like it's the same paradigm, but of course I would. And so I translate a lot. Oh my gosh, go away. I'm sorry, pop up. And so I love talking about the Dhamma without any of um, the fancy hat and anything on any of the clothes of just the religious mystique. Just like, this is a salt of the earth truth that helps me in my day, and that's something that I kind of see with this whole issue with lineage. One angle that you could come from is like taking it out of the social construct of authority and stuff, and being like, I have respect for this person. I um, I know this person. I think in this way of them. I trust them, um, and also being transparent. This is this is where I got this from. And one thing that makes me very appealing to you very appealing to me, is that you're really down to earth, and that really works for me, because I was going into it from this ego point of like, aha, I have this secret knowledge, and look at me with all these great things about reality, when it's literally just like that. That anyway. I guess my point is that um, uh, the whole that whole thing of like, it's Buddhism, we have these great secrets, and all that, and they are great secrets. They're just like, it's like, oh, this is something that's really helpful, and I you know and it really doesn't have anything to do with any special knowledge. It's just somebody sat around for a really long time and got a really good idea of how their mind worked.
Okay. Well, let's talk about lineage for just a moment.
Okay.
There is a let us say a point in time, not a sorry to start over that. There becomes an evolutionary process where one goes through. And that evolutionary process has a major component to it, and that is enthusiasm and joy for the Dhamma.
Mm-hmm.
This enthusiasm and this joy for the Dhamma is actually a kind of a shorthand way of talking about the one who is, if you're enthusiastic for the Dhamma, that means that you're willing to jump into the Dhamma at any particular point you recognize that you're not in it.
Yeah.
Right? This is what we mean then by the stream entry.
Yeah.
Okay, to enter into the flow of the Dhamma, except that it's not a stream or a trickle. It's much more like a tsunami.
It feels that way.
And so the quality of the lineage is to bring about through contact with a teacher or someone who has this joy of the Dhamma, this enthusiasm for the Dhamma, and that it kind of rubs off.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that we give back to the Buddha as the only distinction. The only distinction that is there. In fact, there is a sutta about it. It's number, I think it's 112, where Ananda is. This occurs right after the time of the Buddha's death, and that Ananda is out on alms round, and he stops and has a conversation with a Brahmin. While he's having this conversation with the Brahmin, someone comes in and asks another question. They get sidetracked and then gets back eventually to the answer to this question that this Brahmin asked. And Ananda's point is that there is no distinction between those who are left and the Buddha. There is no distinction. That the only distinction that could be there is that he figured it out for himself. But once he figured it out, he is now transmitting it. And that transmission is a complete transmission of knowledge, habits, understanding, and way of life. It's a lifestyle change that we go through. So that's really almost impossible to get out of a book.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a lot of Dhamma knowledge. You can also sit and do a lot of meditation. But that fire, that spark that brings about nobility in a person is normally transmitted, but it's not transmitted like Shaktipat or some ceremony or whatever like that. It builds up over time, just like putting a pot under a fire or on a fire.
And Dhammarato, I had that moment with my friend. I wrote you about like it was so beautiful. Just like we have to have a higher power in Buddhism, and he chose cause and effect, and that just really led into a natural discussion of the whole deal. And he was like, "Holy, how did I not see this before?" And he's been happy all week after a down period, and now I get to share in that happiness, and I have my friend back. And it's like that. I just heard an old song from the 50s that I want to get it tattooed. I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to light a flame or start a flame in your heart.
Okay. There's a lot of songs from the 50s that are inspirational.
Yeah.
Hard rock and acid rock and punk rock and that kind of thing that's gotten quite common and popular actually has some anger built into it. Some rage singing, raging. Do not go into that good night. Fight, fight, fight kind of mentality. To where, as you said, we're looking for more of cooperation.
Yeah.
And while I'm thinking about it, religions teach cooperation, but that the people themselves are not skilled enough to follow the actual teachings of, for instance, Jesus.
Yeah.
They don't follow the teachings of Jesus, and they wind up following the teachings of Christianity because they can do that.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the reasons why they like Donald Trump so much is because he's like them.
Okay, full stop. Full stop. I have an important point here. We when we talk down about the other side and say they're dumb, which you're not saying, but people do, and say, "Oh, you need to act this certain way, and it's not okay, to have the views that you have about race or about gender or whatever." We created Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a reaction to our side being judgmental and oppressive.
That may be wearing too much guilt. That in fact, we cannot assume the responsibility for their division.
Our division, not separate from it.
Well, when they're making the division, they make it a them and an us.
We contribute. Every time that we make somebody the other and we talk down, and we don't act with understanding for where they come from, we create the division.
All right. But every time we, let us say, ignore the reality of the situation, then we are operating out of instincts also.
Mm-hmm.
And that prevents us then from seeing an alternate way.
Which reality in particular?
Well, if we're going to talk about the reality of generosity,
Mm-hmm.
then we have to see all the various kinds of generosity and how some of them work better than others,
Okay.
so that we can see the truth of the situation. This is part of the part of wisdom, is to accept that there is division in the world, that we're not going to have unity simply because we want to have unity. We have to recognize the division when there is division.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, we have to be able to see it. And so when I'm talking about it like this, I'm not putting down Christianity. In fact, I would like to see it if they would, in fact, start paying very close attention to what Jesus actually said and start doing the things that Jesus actually said. But I don't find them doing that. And because they're not doing that, they now are wanting to have a savior that's more like them,
Yeah.
almost to the point that modern day, well, it happened in the time of Jesus too. I was about to say that they would reject Jesus, but in fact, Jesus was rejected in his own time anyway.
Um, one thing that I'm really uh, lucky about is that um, in 12-step programs, they talk a lot about God and higher power. Um, and I find myself sitting in this really comfortable middle ground between many different things, where I can see what people are talking about when they talk about the will of God and the hand of providence, and the beauty of prayer, and the need for outside help, and relying on grace. And At the same time, the Dharma is kicking my ass in the best possible way, and I come from an extremely atheist family, and I find that um, all that anybody is talking about is the way that the natural world actually works. It all fits together for me. Point being that um, I have some Christian relatives. All my relatives are American, and this gives me the ability to talk to them. They've noticed I've been writing poems, and some of them talk about God, and so my Christian relatives have noticed, and now I'm able to talk to them on their level as an exploration of different viewpoints, um, and I think that's you know I
Would
have
it
a
be talking on their level, or would it be merely being able to speak in their language?
well
Because you're
that's
able to use their language, but you're actually talking to them at a kind of a higher level. It's the point that I'm making.
I Well, I guess let's talk about levels. Um, that's that strikes me as an important point. Like I I've really appreciated how, even though you, in a very objective sense, are on a higher level than me, you treat me with respect and ease, and that's um, one could read so much into those eyebrows. Um, 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 and again, like the reality of our different experience and competence and different things is there, but I don't feel made less than you, and that really makes me want to talk to you.
Oh,
And
well, Well, you're just as human as I am.
Yeah.
And in fact, two of my best friends are dogs.
Word. I love it. Yeah, and
But
that
I don't hold being a dog against them. But it helps me to understand them a whole lot better.
I mean that's exactly all that I wanted to say. Like um, you heard the whole thing about me getting called out in group for being people's savior, trying to be people's savior, and that's really gotten me to look at um, my need to be above, and my need for approval for being above, and I've gotten cut down to size, and it's been really, really, really nice because now I've
Painful.
started to look at my insecurities. I've started to see the whole trap that nobody can give me approval. It's all my approval. Anything else has to come through the filter of like my approval for myself. And suddenly I'm in a room of equals that have so much to teach me. And that's, that are better at things that I'm bad at. And I can learn from, I don't know, anyway. Um, and so, when I am wanting to connect with my relatives, they're my relatives. I'm sad that my parents are a bit estranged from them on account of religion. I'm interested in what I can gain from their religion because, I have another monk in my life. I have a Catholic monk. He's no longer a monk, but I gain a lot from him, even though they like suffering and Buddhists aren't as keen on it. Um, and um, um, but it all fits together for me, it all seems to be talking about the same damn thing. When you take out the claims about, of our actual reality, and when I read the say 12 steps, it seems to be about the same thing. And when I don't know, I'm smoking a cigarette, or when I'm looking at trees, it all seems to be about the same damn thing. It's the same damn thing. Of course, it's the same damn thing. It's the world. Just
It's
people.
about, well, it's your experience through your senses.
Yeah.
When it's no longer the same thing is when we're thinking about our experience as opposed to actually doing the experience. So the quality is being in the here now. When we are in the here now, then we're in the experience.
Yeah.
And we also have the idea, or they use the concept of being in our head, which
Yeah.
is what the Buddha would refer to as being in hindrance
Yeah.
or being in the mind. So coming out to the outside world is basically then joining with the world, being at union with the world through our senses. The only way that we can sense the world is through our senses. And when our senses are really working very, very well, we almost begin to let a flood of data come in. Back to the Dhamma being a flood. The reality of the situation is magnificent. There's so much happening. We're talking
Yeah.
about cause and effect. There are tens of billions of causes and effects happening every 10 trillionth of a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah. Yeah. It's magnificent would be the
And
word. Yeah.
that's within the 3 to 5 feet around
Yeah.
within the immediate 6 feet. If you take it all into consideration, it gets much, much bigger, much more profound. So this sense of being at one with one's universe or one's environment is another way of talking about being in union with God or being in the lap of God.
Yeah.
That it's a really, really big thing. One of the ways, and I know that you'll think of this as kind of a put down, but in many people's mentality, God is only as big as the God in the Bible.
It's
Yale, whatever.
every damn thing. Every damn thing. Yeah. Every damn nothing.
Okay. So, I don't know if I've told you this before, but there's the example of gravity.
All ears.
You know, they say that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, knows everything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that holds true for gravity, whether it's the gravity of the sun holding the Earth in orbit, or whether it's the Earth holding all of its atmosphere and humans and everything on the Earth. They say that that if a sparrow falls from the sky, God knows it. But in a way, God grabbed that bird and threw it to the ground through the force of gravity.
Yeah.
Now, the point about gravity is that it is everywhere. It is omniscient. It is truly powerful. Look at the kind of rockets that we have to put up, SpaceX, Jupiter class rockets, to get away from the Earth. Why? Because gravity is that powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's also all-knowing. Every time you trip and stumble, you will fall. Why? Because gravity will get you.
Yeah.
It's almost like not only is gravity always there and always watching, but it's intentionally trying to trip you up. It will get you. You do the slightest wrong thing. I mean, just like that book there. That book is just completely capable of falling all the way to the ground, 12 feet below. It's sitting here on the banister. All right. So if we think about it from that perspective, everything that the Christians think of and operate with their idea of God actually does exist.
Yeah.
They just have a very, very small view of it, in the sense that it's like a guy with a long beard holding a lightning bolt or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a very close relationship to the concept of Zeus,
Mm-hmm.
to the Christian God. But that's a very childlike viewpoint of it.
Yeah.
But recognizing that God itself is extraordinarily vast and extraordinarily fast.
Well, here's the thing, though. Like, it's actually extremely encouraging that you and I have the same concept of God. So we
I don't have a concept of God. I'm trying to find a placeholder for the word God.
right.
And we have this Dhammakai. The body of the Dhamma is the Buddhist word for it.
Okay. In other words, everything is, or to put it this way, the Dhamma is just a way of talking about all the stuff that's embodied around us.
And that we can only be in touch with that, literally, by touching it.
So, like, we're supposed to look for God's will, and the idea that it's greater than us and that it cares for us.
I'm not sure any place in the Bible that says look for God's will. But what we do look for in Buddhism is in the sense of cooperation.
Yes.
Okay, that it's not necessarily God's will, but in fact, what many Christians would think of it as providence, or destiny.
Yeah.
I would see nothing more as the habit patterns of the instinctual mind, so that we are instinctually, without making the proper changes, we're destined to live in a certain way, which is dissatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of expressions that we could see how that fit. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. That can be taken to he who was hit when he was a child will hit children.
Yeah.
Okay, he who drank when he was a child because his daddy gave him beer will drink when he's an adult.
Yeah.
There are others that are even more sophisticated, and that is the story of the woman who had a father who was a drunk. And so the first man she married was a drunk. The second man she married was a drunk. They both died from their alcoholism. She married the third man who was sober, and then he became a drunk.
Mm.
All right. This is her karma.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So this idea of karma in Buddhism is actually living out the past or living out our habit systems or living through our instinctual ways rather than waking up and doing it wisely. But now waking up and doing it wisely now is actually that part of becoming noble. We change our lineage. Jesus says you must be born again, but he's not talking about going through the mom's womb again or rebirth, reincarnation, or anything. He's talking about being reborn of the spirit.
Yeah.
But the spirit he's talking about is actually your higher mind, the ability to think, the ability to practice the skills of remembrance and right effort so that we can change our destiny literally.
Yeah.
Why? Because we're no longer operating through our instinctual way. You see, the problem with operating instinctually is that it's pretty dumb. The program is already set.
Yeah.
You operate if in fact the primary instinct is the self-preservation instinct, and its primary mode of thinking is fear
Yeah.
to keep you alive. It's survival oriented, and this is why so many people who, whether they're in a religion or not, will go for a particular politician or political party because that political party's business is to make people afraid.
Yeah.
Okay. The other way of doing it to get people to vote is to promise them something that they want.
Yeah.
So it's either greed or ill will. Those are the two primary motivators, which are also the two primary forms of suffering. So if we can come out through our own efforts, through our own right effort, that means then that we can now have some freedom of choice about our actions and our behaviors. We can begin to feel the way that we want to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In other words, finally, we have what would be called will. I will do this. I will be happy. And I will not be miserable. Before we had no will about it. We had no choice about it. Choice and will are basically the same thing. So I'm leading up to the punchline of a joke now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What I'm getting at is will is never free.
No.
It's the best we can have is a free will that is expensive. It's expensive before because we don't have it. It's expensive during because we have to make the training, and then it's expensive after because now our will is to choose the truth. When we find so many other people not choosing truth, they're choosing instinct instead.
Mm-hmm.
That in fact only a noble can have free will, and it's not actually free.
So I have this is something that I find myself thinking about a lot. When I think about instinct and spirituality, you talked about gravity and tied that into God's will and stuff. The fact about gravity is that I am a creature that gravity and the other forces in the cosmos, matter and energy, made. I spring from these laws. I have bones, and joints that are suited towards gravity.
I have a sense of equilibrium, and I have a fear of heights that's quite instinctual. And excuse me just a second. I'm having an excited discussion. I'm pretty excited about. If I get too loud, just yell at me.
No worries. I just want to know how you turn that box on.
I do not use the TV. You'll have to ask someone else. So, when people talk about, God being, when people talk about God being love, that sounded really cheesy. But then I just looked around and wow, actually, there's something creative about the universe, and the light that sprung from it is mutually supportive. And inside of me is a system that, has all of these responses that are meant for the world around me. They're meant to guide me. And when I think about spirituality, and I see this across spiritual traditions, there's lots of ways of phrasing it. I'm getting more in touch with the guidance system in my body and my mind, and the guidance system of society, and the way that the world works. And in that way, everything is helpful inside of me, even this bad stuff. Everything outside of me can be a tool. God is love.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Rather than me spending 10 minutes attacking the word love,
Yeah.
not the concept,
Help.
but the word,
It's help.
I would prefer to continue along on our topic about gravity,
Okay.
because when I would speak to that about gravity, then some Christian will come up and say, yeah, but God caused gravity.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we need to look at it a little bit deeper.
Ooh, deeper than gravity. I like this.
All right, let's start with the speed of light. What causes light to be at the speed of light? Or another way of thinking about it, well, what is the speed of light and what determines the speed of light?
Light.
Because the speed of light is determined by the medium that it is in. That's an important quality, that light is in fact affected by the medium that it is in.
Okay.
You probably know that if you put a pencil in a glass of water, that if you look at it on the side, the pencil looks like that it's been broken or misshaped.
Yep.
Also, when people learn to go fishing with a spear, go spear fishing for fish, and they're standing on the shore, they can't hit where they see the fish. They've got to strike their pole beside it.
Yeah.
Reason for that is because the speed of light changes in water. It's not the same speed as it is in the air. Did you know that?
No, but it makes sense when I think about other waves, sound,
Okay, well, I've got a bit of a physics background, so bear with me. The speed of light in an absolute vacuum is 186,310 miles per second. But in outer space, which is not actually quite a vacuum, and they know what's out there now, it's down to 186,278 miles per second.
Okay.
Wow, that's a quite significant fall between a complete vacuum and the vacuum of deep space. But it also slows down inside the solar system because there's that many particles that are inside the solar system.
Yeah.
It slows down further when it's in the transmission line for electricity. The electricity along the high-speed transmission line, that's why it gets hot, is because it's losing energy. And part of the way of the loss of the energy is not just voltage and amperage that's reduced. The speed of the light or the speed of the electricity is also reduced down to about 100 and about 170 miles per second. 100 instead of 186, is down to about 170 when they're doing the very best job they can. Now, inside a laptop, it's actually down to about 130. And this is why all of the things in the computer get hot, is because of the transmission, everything gets slowed down. So let's go back and say that you know that photons can be measured as both a particle and they can be measured as a wave.
Yeah, I don't know much about that. It seems funny.
Well, it's I said it correctly though. Measured as
Hmm.
the actual property, we don't know because we don't have a way of measuring the actual property of a photon. But we can measure it as a particle because we know about particles, and we can measure it as a wave because we know about waves.
Mm-hmm. But we
But
don't
we
really
don't know
know.
about photons.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that if we're thinking about it as a wave, look at a wave goes like up and down and up and down and up and down. What is going to cause the wave if it's going up? Why doesn't it just continue to go up? What is it that causes inside the wave particle of the light for it to change?
Oh yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask.
Forward momentum?
Well, what we're getting at is that there is a deeper law that physicists are exploring now,
Yeah.
but it's very difficult to explore because things happen so fast, and that is the underlying the underlying law of causality.
Yeah.
Inside of a proton, inside of a nucleus of an atom, there are protons and neutrons.
Yeah.
Why do these things happen? The answer is that there's a law of causality still in operation at the subparticle level, all the way up to the level expressed in gravity. Gravity is nothing but an aspect of causality. Buddha knew about that. Cause and effect. Idiopapajayata, paticca samuppada. Everything has to do with cause effect, cause effect. This causes that. And that let us say the childlike way of looking at it would be the idea of this action causes this result, or good action causes good result, and bad action causes bad result, is the way that they look at it normally. But then the magic comes in when they say, oh, that's got to be, in the sense that if a good action happens, it's got to lead to a good result. Or if there is a bad action, it's got to lead to a bad result, no matter how long it takes.
Law of unintended consequences, buddy.
Right, exactly. That in fact, most karma is not either good nor bad, but there is mixed. It's got both bright and dark elements.
Well, then what's good for me might not be good for you, and I might think I'm doing good, and it's not good.
Here's a clear example. The big score, the big match, the big sports contest, football of one description or another, and all the crowds are there, and then the referee throws a penalty flag, and half the people cheer, and half the people groan. They stand up, half people like it and half don't like it. So the question would be then, was the throwing of that penalty flag, was that a good action or a bad action? The answer is it's dependent upon many factors. We can't make that kind of a judgment. You could say it's a matter of opinion. Here's another example of that. You buy stock in the stock market and the stock goes up and you sell it. So when you bought that stock, was that a good buy? Well, how about if you bought it at that price and later the stock goes down and now you sell it and you've had a loss? Was that original purchase a good price or a bad price? The answer is that the action itself no longer depends upon the action itself. It depends upon the result, that the result often defines what the original action was, good or bad. So much for karma.
Well, and I look at what's helpful for me is with all the emotional torture that I put myself through, is knowing I don't know what's good and what's bad. Things that I thought were horrible have turned out to be great lessons. Things that I thought I was really successful at turned out to be hurting people. Yeah, good and bad.
Okay. Well, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was actually a fan of the story of Adam and Eve, right down to the scriptures. To see, the thing that was kind of amazing for Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was that he had access to a Bible, but he was not around Christians. So he did not pick up all of the behavior and attitudes or anything of the Christians. He just had what was in the Bible. And so the story of Adam and Eve actually is a moral story. It's like Aesop fables. And yet many people miss the story, miss the morality of the story, because they get bogged down in the details of the story. The story becomes more important than the moral of the story. So that means that people get wrapped up in talking snakes, and the woman did it first, and where's my fig leaf, and who got tossed out of paradise, and issues of childbirth. All kinds of things are in that story, The apple, that's the main one. What's the apple? Was it an apple? Because the word apple is not in the actual story. What is the word? Fruit. The fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Well, in many, many traditions, the word fruit actually means the result. Mm-hmm. That in fact, the fruit of one's actions, the fruits of your labor. That's quite common in our English language, is using the word fruit as the result of an action. And that we see that in fact the apple tree, the planting of the apple tree, the fruit of the apple tree is the apple. All right, which means the result of the apple tree is the fruit, which is an apple. Now that we understand that, let's look at, well, what could possibly be the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
Good and bad. Judgment.
Exactly. The knowledge of good and evil means that when Adam and Eve ate of the knowledge of good and evil, they are actually having to put up with the results of their knowledge of what was good and what was bad. So imagine that you're in a nice paradise. I mean, I've got a nice paradise here. Oh, wait a minute. That tree, this tree, it's got wormholes and bugs and yellow leaves. This tree is not suitable for my paradise.
Yeah.
I'm going to go dig that tree up and burn it. And if I find any other trees in my paradise that have non-perfect leaves on them, I'm going to burn it down, and I'm going to pave paradise, and I'm going to put up a parking lot. That's what happened to the paradise, is that Adam and Eve destroyed paradise themselves. They weren't thrown out of it. They destroyed it through their own judgments. This is not good enough, and that's not good enough. That's the actual moral of the story, is that we do eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. So if we go around judging things, then we have to put up with the fruit of that.
Yeah. I've been looking at that with myself, something that comes to my head sometimes when I'm doing something good is like, am I a good person yet? And like as I've been realizing about like other people's approval and my own approval and stuff, it's like, man, I get to decide good, but also just like what result does it bring, right? Like what happens when I act this way rather than like, am I good or am I bad? Because again, yeah, like
All right, so maybe that's no longer a decent question to ask.
indecent, yes. It
It's
is a bit of an indecent.
and why is because you're actually placing the authority for answering that question outside of your own experience.
Yeah.
Am I good or bad means you've got to select a criteria. Well, where does that criteria come from?
Whether it works for me or doesn't, ultimately.
All right. Well, now we're getting a little bit closer then, in the sense of maybe the right question to ask is, am I satisfied with the way things are right now? Okay. Now,
But
here's something.
I've been satisfied with the way things are, and I've been deluded about the effect that I'm having on others and myself.
All right. Well, let's go one step further about that, how things are right now. If things were going to according to God's plan, and the plan was good, and things in fact did go according to God's plan, then the plan would be at the correct place of the way things are right now. So the way things are right now is in fact God's plan in action.
I just got to cooperate. When you said the word cooperation, that was like, yeah, I just have to cooperate with the things around me, and everything will unfold naturally.
Precisely, which means now you have to remember to cooperate.
Yes.
Because it's instinctual that we don't cooperate, that we put ourselves in self-preservation mode, which gives rise then to all of the other instincts, including materialism and making rules for ourselves and others, and identifying with views. So all four of these things, identification with views is actually what's our territory. Okay. The rules of the nest, or how we get along, is our set of rites, rules, rituals. You could actually call that society. But also it's our materialism, that we don't feel safe unless we've got a cell phone or, whatever it is that we have. But we feel that we have to have material possessions. All of those three, the materialism, the rites, rules, rituals, and our views about who we are, which is actually the banner. You were talking about carrying the banner before. Yeah. Carrying the banner means I belong to this organization or that organization or whatnot, like this. And so if those organizations are political organizations, then I'm buying politics. Mm-hmm. Which means if things happen good for that political party, then I feel good. But when things happen bad, then I feel bad. I'm giving my feelings away to honor the identification that I'm making. So if we stop identifying with anything, so we can say, well, what about the Organization for Buddhist Teachers in the West? The answer to that would be an intermediate organization to help people come out of all of the other organizations.
Oh, heck, I mean, I can participate in these, these great concatenations of activities that we call organizations, but it doesn't make me, I don't have to identify with it.
Exactly so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Give me just a moment. I'll be right back. Is that okay?
Okay. Right. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So you're back. I don't hear you. I cannot hear you.